But I want to talk about a story you have about the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, which is so basically we talked about these national anthem protests before. In fact, Travis Waldron, sports reporter at the Huffington Post, you may have heard of.
Also lit.
Is he?
We had him in earlier this week.
Shout out to young Trav.
Last time I was sitting in this chair, he was on talking also about the spread of players taking a knee. And you reported on some internal emails that you found up the administrative ladder. I hope you can break down for us. What did you find?
Yeah, it was real dope. Me and a fellow colleague, Richard Johnson, shout out to Richard. Editor came to me, because what I cover is race at the intersection of sports, basically, with a mix of politics and society. But they came to me, and my editors came to me and were like, hey, what if we, sent this public records request to Nebraska? This just happened. And for those that don't know what happened, as there's been a sprawl of protests all across the United States, as it's mixed into athletics, three black players, Deshaun Neal, Muhammad Berry, and Michael Rose Ivy at the University of Nebraska took a knee to protest injustice at an away game at Northwestern in September. Afterwards, a publicly elected regent by the name of Hal Daub, a guy who was the mayor of Omaha, who was in Congress in the 80s, who ran for Senate in 2008, he was like, nah, fam, I really don't like this. Y'all are disrespecting the university. Y'all can go somewhere else with this protest, basically. A large amount of Nebraska fans also felt the same way in a very conservative state, a very red state that only has voted blue 7 or 8 times since 1868. So they really out here. So what happened was that we sent in that request. We got all emails from non-Nebraska University email accounts going to the president, the chancellor, and to this specific regent. And what we got back was this private correspondence to show a timeline of his private emails going up to the first moment where he jumped on public record about these protests. A lot of that was that he was telling the new president, Hank Bounds, what these comments would have legs in this conservative state. What were the names of these players? Were they on scholarship? And just a bunch of things. And specifically, I think the worst comment was that the University of Nebraska was not a forum for ethnic, personal, or racial grievances. So it was real lit out there in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's real lit. So hey.
How has the university responded to all this?
The university's actually been great. Hank Bounds was like, we stand by our players, et cetera, et cetera. As the president, he stood by his players. Mike Riley, the coach, stood by his players, and Hal Daub in private also, besmirched his name as well. He was disappointed in the coach for allowing such behavior to go on. So yeah, a large chunk, the majority of the chunk of fans and alumni and everything like that, they really supported this. So shout out to them for actually being supportive, where a lot of different instances we would not see that. But the difference is that the guy you keep putting in office, whether it's Congress, whether it's as a regent, whether it's anything, he's the one who has the power here. So it doesn't really matter if this gaggle of white people within Nebraska are like, yeah, we kind of still rock out with this. But the dude with actually some power is like, I don't.
Right.
It don't really matter what y'all saying. It kind of matters what he's saying. So, and it's not like he's saying this in a vacuum. There's hundreds of emails that we got that people that supported him, and he made it clear that people not in the correspondence we received also were really down for what he had to say. So
I thought that one of the interesting lines in there was, in the emails that you disclosed, complaints of this is a taxpayer-funded institution, and so you want to do this, go do it on someone else's dime, not ours. As if you're a part of some taxpayer-funded institution, you don't have the right to peacefully protest. You don't have the right to push for social justice because somehow you're attending a public university. That's
that's basically how it go. I mean, this is football. It's football. Come on now. Once you put them pads on, you don't got no rights. That's how we do this. So I mean, you take places like Nebraska, maybe even somewhere like Iowa. You take places in SEC schools, and people take their football very, very seriously, especially whether it's NFL, college, high school, etc. Anywhere below the Mason-Dixon.
Has the movement really taken off at the college level? Because so much of the attention that initially garnered was in the NFL. Of course, Colin Kaepernick being the one who kicked it off, and is this something you're seeing a lot more students participate in? Because that could also create real movements on campuses that I think could also help to produce potentially some kind of at least momentum around reform.
I mean, it's there, but the difference between the college ranks and the NFL ranks is that most times, like 90% of the time, if you're a college football player, you're in the locker room when the national anthem plays. Like, you don't have the opportunity to actually protest the national anthem. So the only time these players at Nebraska had that opportunity was at Northwestern.
At the away game.
And they were like, well, since we're here, Might as well get down, get on his knee, protest some injustice. I mean, so it was the opportunity they had, and they made good use of their platform to show that it does not matter how much money you have as an athlete, how much status you have as an athlete. If you are a black athlete, a brown athlete in the country, you are just as oppressed as any black or brown man or woman or child just out here. Like just because you have status does not mean that you are excused from state-sanctioned violence from police. Thabo Cephalosha got his leg broken by NYPD last year before, and he's a pretty well-known basketball player.
Right.
So that doesn't excuse you. When you black, you black.
Right.
That's just it.
I mean, you had someone like Tim Scott who gave this very memorable speech, and he's one of only 2 black senators. Other one, of course, being Cory Booker. And Tim Scott obviously is a conservative, so some people say, well, they're the ones who are not rallying around criminal justice reform. There's some who have, and I think he was trying to make the case. He's saying even as a sitting senator, there have been times where he's been stopped by security because they look at him and they don't actually think that he belongs there.
There are players of color within the NBA who have switched teams and have gone to their lockers for the first time, and security has stopped them. There was an incident, I think last year, where Toronto Raptors security stopped DeMar DeRozan. It doesn't surprise me. I'm not going to belittle anything that Tim Scott says about the fact that maybe he got stopped as black. Listen, again, if you black, you black. Every time I go on assignment and go into these spaces where black lives are kind of being disrupted, or there's a spectacle of them at a high form of protest, I get stopped. When I was in Charlotte covering those protests around the stadium protests after Keith Lamont Scott got killed, I got stopped by police multiple times. So, because I look like a protester, because a protester has a specific look, I guess. So, listen, it happens. You're not excused from being black just because you got some money, just because you got some status, because you got a tie on.
That's something that, look, I grew up in the South. I grew up in a very white family.
Oh, yeah.
Went to school at University of Alabama.
Oh, yeah. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, right. But, as we started talking about race and it started becoming more, we started hearing more black voices talk about this a couple years ago, that was the thing that struck me so much. Every black person in America has the story.
Right.
Right? They've got their story of the time that they were told, you sure you need to be here? You look lost. You should be going somewhere else at best.
Been lost all my life.
Right. You know what I mean? And that's the best case scenario. You should probably find another way out of here.
One of the president's most memorable speeches was after the verdict was handed down in the Trayvon Martin killing and George Zimmerman was acquitted, and he came out and very personally spoke about, knowing what it feels like to have a woman hold her purse a little tighter if he was walking down the street, or hearing the sound of the car doors locking, because that's the reaction that people have to, especially a black male, but this extends, as you said, to women, to anyone who is a person of color.